Hi, I'm Robin Fickey, Senior Vice President of Research at World Business Chicago. We are here today at Chicago's Venture Summit, the future of climate tech. And I'm here with Joanne Rodriguez, who I'd love to take a minute and tell us about yourself. Introduce yourself.
So I'm Joanne Rodriguez. I am the founder and CEO of Mycocyle. My kitschy tagline is we train mushrooms to eat trash and create renewable bio-based raw materials. Essentially what we're doing is decarbonizing the construction material supply chain and transforming waste to value, partnering with nature though.
Wow, great. So tell me a little bit about how you decided to, one, found a company that trains mushrooms. That's just, How did you tell us about that story?
So I worked for decades in the construction products and material manufacturing field. Sure. I'm a former director of sustainability. I'm recovering. And we made products from the harshest chemicals. So from petroleum derivatives, they have plasticizers. You can imagine the uphill climb it was to be a director of sustainability and talk about the greenness of your materials.
Right.
And so in 2017, after trying to start a roof recycling program for the corporation, I just am like, I can't do this. Like it was, I felt like I was feeding the problem and not helping the problem, and burnout and midlife crisis, call it what you want, right?
Yeah.
So I left, I went into environmental consulting, and I happened to take a course in permaculture design from Oregon State University. And they talk about mushrooms as the natural remediators of our earth, how the indigenous people always had a reliance on them. And then they're the only known cleaners of petroleum. And the best and most efficient. So I'm like, light bulb moment. This is what we have in our products.
Right.
Nature does this. I like nature. Let's put this all together and see what happens. And so in 2018, I filed a patent. I will be 5 next week.
Oh my gosh.
Formed Mycocyle and then launched in 2020. And so that entrepreneurial journey was a little bit funny though.
Yeah.
So like there was a whole year before I launched because I'm like, I don't know how to do this.
Right. So how did you learn? How did you learn how to do that?
So I still dabbled around even though I had filed the patent. I'm like, I knew of companies out there from my career. One of them was Innovator. They had been already working with mycelium, which is the root structure of mushrooms, to make mycelium packaging and insulation. And so I reached out to Evan Bayer, their CEO, and I'm like, hey, I got this idea. What do you think? And he's like, I think it's great. We didn't have the bandwidth to do it. Yeah. Like, if you can build it, you should do it. And he's like, let me introduce you to these incubators, these accelerators. I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, send me your pitch deck. And I'm like, of course, pitch deck. And then I Googled what is a pitch deck.
Yeah.
And so in 2019, I had the good fortune to join the Latinx incubator through the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce at 1871. I won that showcase, so I learned how to do a pitch deck and a pitch. And then I went on to the Clean Tech Open National out of LA, which was for emerging clean tech entrepreneurs. And then that just kind of started the journey. And I launched in 2020 through the National Renewable Energy Labs.
Oh, wow. That's a fabulous, I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. That's really fascinating. There's so many things that I think are kind of relevant. So first, I just want to share, we released a report recently that is Chicagoland's Green Future. And we actually take a look at patents that are here in Chicagoland, held by companies and individuals here in Chicagoland. There are about 788. Mycocyle is definitely on the list that popped up. Yeah. And it's interesting because we actually kind of compared that across other cities and how do we compare. And it's, I would like Chicago to, Chicagoland to perform a little bit better. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious on that, right? When you think about other folks who may have this idea and your kind of your journey of developing a patent, what would you share that kind of was one helpful about Chicagoland that really, and really let's be truthful, what needs to be here in Chicagoland to kind of really foster that?
Well, I think I think events like this help.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember having this conversation with Abin and Nicole, and I was like, I almost burst out into tears. I'm like, yeah, I mean, we need to have a future of climate tech. We need to elevate this and make it exciting, because I think it's a heavy topic. Yeah. And there's a lot of science around it. And so people tend to not want to engage in conversations around greenhouse gas reduction and climate change, right? It seems so catastrophic and enormous as an individual. What could we do? And but I think in terms of technology development, just creating a hub where there's information and access to resources, filing a patent, we have some of the best attorneys in the world here. And I think understanding very early on that these should be some of the conversations in the lab embedded entrepreneur programs at the university level. Even for first-time founders like me to understand that you can inexpensively file a provisional patent, have a year to go out and talk about your idea and develop it out. And I think a lot of people don't understand the mechanics of that.
Of how that works.
Yeah. Because that's really leverage as you build, and especially when you're building something that is very unique or potentially challenging. To have that patent portfolio, we have 5 patents filed currently. It's important. It lends value to your organization. It gives you bandwidth to start to put together collaborations to build out the infrastructure to implement that.
Oh, that's actually really great advice. So let me pivot just a little bit and talk about Mycocyle and kind of what it actually does. And we have this philosophy that in Chicago, our theory is that we really should be performing better when we look at green economic activity, using the quotes green, really looking at what is truly reducing, greenhouse gas emissions and moving towards decarbonization. We think that we should be performing better given the diverse, economy that we have here, right? And so tell us a little bit about what Mycocyle does and who your customers are and how you engage with the non-green side of the economy.
So we're deploying the science of mycology. So that's where we get our name from, Mycocycle, and we're using it to create value where none existed. Waste is categorized as waste because it has no value, right? We throw it away. If we start to transition this into an economy that makes sense, that has a greater or higher purpose, in a circular economy, quite frankly, people start to pay attention. And so Mycocyle uses the mycelium, the root structure of a mushroom, just optimizes it. So we developed a patent around a process, not around a species or nature. That's not cool. We want to patent nature. But around the process, and we expose fungi to different contaminants and different materials. And then we can make this generational expansion through enzyme activities that we collect. And so I always say our high tech is low tech. We just lean in and give nature what nature wants to really thrive and succeed. And so then from there, we're able to treat a myriad of waste streams, primarily because of my background being in the construction materials sector. We've focused on rubber, on asphalt, carpet, gypsum drywall. And so there's also then the duality to mycelium, which is a basic fermentation process. I always say we're brewing the most wicked beer ever, right?
There you go.
So we use this process to not only detoxify those materials, because they're filled with plasticizers, and those are endocrine disruptors and carcinogens and stuff, right? We're taking those out, but then the mycelium has a dual purpose. It transforms it. The mycelium itself is actually a naturally occurring material. So it's lending properties of fire resistance, water resistance, and lightweight. So we can capitalize on that duality to detoxify waste in 2 weeks or less. In what would take in landfill 300 to 400 years, if ever.
Oh my goodness.
And we also developed in this past year enabling technology for ourselves our My Container, which is a mobile bioprocessor, so we could decentralize waste management.
Yeah.
So we could house we need a constant temperature range.
Yeah.
And it's hard to ask a customer to do that, right? Like, hey, can you on this next to this landfill give us this temperature range? So we launched that this year, and that has been foundationally part of our success in the past 12 months. But in terms of who some of our customers are, we really want to encourage and engage the recyclers who are already trying to do the right thing. Right. So these are small to mid-size recyclers that are material recycling facilities or transfer stations. They have a footprint, and we can put these containers there, train them, they can license to operate, and then we do a revenue share with them to really subsidize the segmentation of the waste stream.
Right.
Our other customers include building owners, so large developers like Jeff Shapak and Tint, that where they could put it into their budgets that they want a certain percentage of their materials recycled through our process. And then the manufacturers. And that's probably been what's most shocking to me, is that we have the top 10 building manufacturers in the world working with us right now to innovate reuse of what is our new raw material. So it's a filler or a fiber that they can replace things that are being mined and extracted from the earth.
Right.
So we're like, keep it in the earth. Just let's use the material we already made.
Oh, that's fascinating. I love the story. Thank you for sharing that. That's really amazing. And it's actually interesting to think about. And I'm wondering if you've quantified, maybe you haven't yet because you have so many things to do. It seems like there's a lot of sort of knock-on or follow-on effects of both, sort of, economic activity, but also really sort of energy saving, resource saving. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
We can absolutely quantify it. So having come from the sector, two stodgy industries like waste management and materials, and a woman pushing mushroom tech, right?
Yeah.
So
you have to have it quantified.
Yeah, you have to. I have to be 10 times better. Exactly. And so we take that position from day one. We got third-party validation on our Mycocylce product, which was the first product we launched, that it's red list chemical free. And validated by a third party, which means that all of the toxins are out of it, which is cool. And then this week we should have the validation on the low embodied carbon nature of our replacement. But we've done some of the numbers on bat insulation, for instance.
Right.
And if you use our replacement for some of the plastics that they would normally put in, we can replace plastic as well. We lower the embodied carbon of bat insulation by over 80%.
Oh, goodness. Wow.
So, yeah, we strive very hard to show.
Yeah. Actually have a metric that people can kind of wrap their heads around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. So, last question, any insights from, the summit just started? Any insights, any things that, founders that maybe sort of, in your position that you were in 5-10 years ago, what should they be taking advantage of here? What's your advice to them?
Oh my goodness. So just start, right?
Yeah.
Do your homework. I feel like I'm like vacation house rules. Do your homework. but no, you have to, I think you really, especially, I don't want to knock on the Midwest and Chicago, but the investment community is just a little stodgy.
Yeah.
And so when you start, and I don't want to say that there isn't an admission that anthropogenic climate change is real.
Right.
But there is some of that.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to come at it from a real economic perspective to say, okay, it does all of these things, but it's also good for the environment.
Right.
And so depending on who we're talking to, it's, we can meet the exact cost of what your supply chain is or lower it.
Right.
We can reduce your scope 3 emissions. We can help you get to zero waste. By the way, the SEC is also like, you can't make these public declarations without validation.
Yeah.
And so let us help you validate and quantify that.
Right.
Let's put it into dollars and cents. And we're using mushrooms to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. There is the Midwestern practicality of nuts and bolts. It's almost like it's a FOMO immune, right? There is
Right.
no FOMO here. You'll want to see the numbers and be very practical about things. So I think what you're offering is great advice.
And I think for the innovators, I just know your stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
you're it's going to be hard, but once you get those investments, it'll be worth it. Some of our best investors are right here out of Chicago.
Right.
They provide the greatest access to networks and follow-on capital. I'm part of the lab embedded entrepreneurship program at
Okay.
Argonne. And so take advantage of the network. And that's probably the number
Yeah.
one thing. Like network, and
Yes.
build in public. Let people see what you're doing. Because you got to be a little bit bigger than you actually are when you're building. Like you
Right.
want people to engage with you and be able to help you too, be able to make those suggestions. And they only know if they know what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're right. The Midwestern practicality is balanced against that Midwestern openness of, yes, here is my network and here we'll share. So thank you, Joanne, so much for taking the
Thank
time
you.
today to talk
This was
with me.
fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.